Marcus stood at attention outside the palace gates, his weathered hands gripping his rifle as the morning sun painted the marble walls gold. At 52, he had served the royal family for 30 years, starting as a young recruit with dreams of honor and duty. His uniform bore no fancy decorations, just the simple badge of the palace guard, but his eyes held the wisdom of someone who had seen kings rise and fall. The kingdom of Valdoria was small but wealthy, nestled between mountains rich with gold and valleys fertile with crops. King Alexander ruled with a firm but fair hand, and the people loved him for his generous heart and wise decisions. Marcus had watched the king grow from a wild young prince into a respected leader, and his loyalty ran deeper than blood. Every morning, Marcus walked the same route through the palace corridors, checking locks, greeting servants, and ensuring the royal family's safety. He knew every stone in these walls, every secret passage, and every face that belonged here. The other guards respected him not because he demanded it, but because he had earned it through 3 decades of unwavering service. His small apartment in the servants' quarters was simple, but comfortable. A single bed, a wooden table, and shelves lined with books about military history and philosophy. Marcus lived modestly on his guard's salary, sending most of his earnings to his sister in the countryside, who was raising 3 children alone after her husband died in a farming accident. The palace buzzed with whispers that morning. Foreign dignitaries had arrived the night before, men in expensive suits who spoke in hushed tones and carried themselves with the arrogance of those accustomed to getting what they wanted. Marcus had seen their type before, wealthy businessmen and politicians who viewed everything, including kingdoms, as commodities to be bought and sold. During his afternoon rounds, Marcus noticed unusual activity in the East Wing where the guests were staying. Servants hurried past with silver trays laden with the finest wines and delicacies, while the visitors' bodyguards positioned themselves at strategic points throughout the hallway. Something important was happening, something that made even the experienced palace staff nervous. As evening approached, Marcus received an unexpected summons. A well-dressed man in his 40s, speaking with a foreign accent, requested a private meeting. The man introduced himself as Viktor Kozlov, a representative of powerful international interests. He wore a diamond-encrusted watch that probably cost more than Marcus earned in 5 years, and his smile never reached his calculating eyes. Viktor led Marcus to a private room away from prying eyes and ears. The walls were decorated with priceless paintings, and crystal glasses filled with aged whiskey sat on a mahogany table. The businessman gestured for Marcus to sit, but the loyal guard remained standing, sensing that this conversation would change everything he thought he knew about honor and duty. The foreign man studied Marcus carefully, taking note of his simple uniform, his calloused hands, and his direct gaze that showed no fear or greed. Viktor had researched every member of the palace staff, and he knew that Marcus was the key to his employer's ambitious plans. The guard's reputation for integrity and his position of trust made him either the perfect ally or the most dangerous obstacle. Viktor poured himself a drink and began speaking in measured tones about opportunity and the changing nature of modern kingdoms. He talked about how smart men recognized when times were shifting and positioned themselves to benefit from inevitable changes. His words were carefully chosen, designed to plant seeds of doubt about traditional notions of loyalty and service. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression giving away nothing of his thoughts. He had heard similar speeches before from corrupt officials and ambitious nobles who tried to justify their betrayals with talk of progress and practical thinking. But something about this man's confidence suggested that whatever he was planning went far beyond simple palace intrigue. The conversation continued for over an hour, with Viktor painting pictures of a future where old-fashioned concepts like royal loyalty were obsolete. He spoke of global networks of power and influence that could reshape entire nations, and he hinted that those who helped facilitate such changes would be rewarded beyond their wildest dreams. As the meeting concluded, Viktor handed Marcus an elegant business card made of thick, expensive paper. He suggested that the guard think carefully about their discussion and promised that they would speak again soon. The businessman's parting smile contained a mixture of confidence and menace that sent a chill down Marcus's spine. Walking back to his quarters that night, Marcus felt the weight of 30 years of service pressing on his shoulders. He had sworn an oath to protect the royal family with his life, and that oath had given meaning to every day of his adult existence. But Victor's words had awakened a troubling awareness of how vulnerable the kingdom really was to forces beyond its borders. The loyal guard stood at his window, looking out at the palace gardens where he had walked countless times during night patrols. The familiar sight brought him comfort, but also highlighted how much he had to lose if the wrong choices were made. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and Marcus sensed that his true test of loyalty was only beginning. 3 days passed before Victor approached Marcus again, but the guard felt the businessman's presence like a shadow throughout the palace. The foreign delegation attended formal dinners and private meetings with the king, presenting themselves as investors interested in Valdoria's mining rights and trade agreements. To most observers, they appeared to be legitimate businessmen seeking profitable partnerships. Marcus noticed details that others missed. The visitors' bodyguards carried weapons that were more sophisticated than necessary for simple protection. Their communication devices were military-grade, and they spoke in coded phrases that suggested coordination with outside forces. Most troubling of all, they seemed to know the palace layout better than guests should, asking specific questions about security protocols and guard rotations. The second meeting took place in the palace library, surrounded by ancient books that chronicled Valdoria's proud history. Victor had chosen the location deliberately, wanting to emphasize the contrast between old traditions and new realities. He sat across from Marcus at a reading table, a leather briefcase beside him containing documents that would change the guard's life forever. Victor opened the conversation by complimenting Marcus on his research into the guard's background. He spoke knowledgeably about Marcus's family, his sister's financial struggles, and the medical bills that had accumulated after her youngest child's recent surgery. The businessman's information was disturbingly accurate, suggesting an intelligence network that reached far beyond the palace walls. The offer, when it finally came, was breathtaking in its scope. Victor slid a bank statement across the table showing an account opened in Marcus's name, containing $5 million. He explained that this was merely a down payment, with 10 times that amount available upon completion of a simple task. The guard's hands trembled slightly as he stared at numbers that represented more money than his entire family could earn in 10 lifetimes. Victor's employers, he explained, were planning a bloodless corporate takeover of Valdoria's government. They had already secured the cooperation of key ministers and military commanders through a combination of bribes, blackmail, and threats. The kingdom's vast mineral wealth would be transferred to international corporations, while the royal family would be allowed to maintain their titles as ceremonial figureheads with no real power. The businessman painted this coup as an inevitable modernization process that would bring prosperity to everyone involved. He showed Marcus detailed financial projections demonstrating how ordinary citizens would benefit from foreign investment and technological advancement. The presentation was professionally prepared and convincing, designed to make betrayal seem like patriotic duty. Marcus's role would be simple, but crucial. During the next state dinner, he would ensure that certain security measures were temporarily disabled, allowing Victor's associates to install surveillance equipment throughout the palace. This technology would monitor all of the royal family's private conversations, providing the intelligence needed to manipulate future political decisions. The guard asked probing questions about the plan's timeline and consequences, but Victor deflected most inquiries with assurances that everything had been carefully orchestrated by people far more powerful and intelligent than either of them. He emphasized that resistance was futile since the takeover would happen regardless of Marcus's cooperation, but those who helped facilitate the transition would be richly rewarded for their wisdom. As proof of his organization's reach, Victor showed Marcus photographs of similar operations in other small kingdoms and republics. Newspaper clippings documented the mysterious disappearances of government officials who had opposed foreign investment, while success stories highlighted the luxurious lifestyles enjoyed by those who had cooperated with the new order. The businessman gave Marcus exactly 1 week to make his decision, warning that hesitation would be interpreted as opposition. He reminded the guard that his sister and her children lived in an isolated farming community where accidents could happen easily, especially to families who lacked proper protection. The threat was subtle but unmistakable, wrapped in concerns about rural crime and the dangers of living far from medical facilities. Victor left behind a secure communication device that would allow Marcus to contact him directly when ready to proceed. The phone contained detailed instructions for the security breach, along with architectural plans of the palace that showed knowledge of systems that should have been classified. The level of preparation demonstrated that this conspiracy had been developing for months, if not years. That night, Marcus sat in his quarters staring at the bank statement that represented financial freedom beyond his wildest dreams. He could pay for his sister's children to attend the finest universities, ensure their medical care for life, and never worry about money again. The temptation was overwhelming, especially when he considered how little his decades of loyal service had earned him in material terms. But as he looked around his simple room, Marcus was reminded of the values that had guided his entire adult life. The books on his shelves spoke of honor, duty, and the courage to do what was right even when it cost everything. The photographs of his family showed people who had raised him to believe that integrity could not be bought at any price. The loyal guard walked to his window and gazed out at the palace gardens where King Alexander often took evening strolls with his young daughter. The sight of the trusting monarch, unaware of the conspiracy swirling around him, filled Marcus with both protective instinct and crushing responsibility. Tomorrow would bring new pressures, but tonight he would pray for the wisdom to choose correctly. Marcus carefully placed the bank statement in his desk drawer, not as a treasured opportunity but as a reminder of how easily loyalty could be tested. The secure phone remained on his table, its silent presence representing a crossroads that would define not only his future, but the fate of everyone he had sworn to protect. The state dinner was scheduled for Friday evening, giving Marcus exactly 48 hours to wrestle with the most important decision of his life. The palace buzzed with preparation as servants polished silver, arranged flowers, and prepared elaborate meals for the visiting dignitaries. Everyone seemed excited about the grand event, unaware that it might mark the beginning of their kingdom's downfall. Marcus found it impossible to concentrate on his duties. During his morning rounds, he caught himself staring at the royal family portraits lining the corridors, thinking about the generations of kings and queens who had built this peaceful nation through wisdom and sacrifice. The current king's great-grandfather had died defending Valdoria from foreign invaders, choosing honor over surrender even when defeat seemed certain. On Wednesday morning, Marcus received a phone call that changed everything. His sister called in tears to tell him that her youngest son had collapsed at school and needed immediate surgery that their local hospital couldn't perform. The operation would cost more than she could earn in 5 years, and without it, the boy would die within weeks. The timing seemed too convenient to be coincidental, but Marcus couldn't risk his nephew's life on suspicions. Victor appeared that afternoon as if summoned by Marcus's desperation. The businessman expressed genuine concern about the family emergency and offered to advance funds for the medical treatment immediately, no questions asked. He even arranged for the boy to be transferred to the finest private hospital in Europe, with all expenses covered by his organization's charitable foundation. The gesture of apparent kindness made Marcus's moral struggle even more complex. Victor wasn't simply offering blood money for betrayal. He was saving a child's life while asking for cooperation that he claimed would ultimately benefit everyone. The businessman spoke eloquently about the greater good and the sometimes painful sacrifices required for positive change. As Wednesday evening approached, Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of accepting or rejecting Victor's offer, he requested a meeting with King Alexander. The loyal guard had served the royal family for 30 years without ever asking for a private audience, making his request both unusual and urgent. The king agreed to see him immediately, sensing the gravity of the situation. The meeting took place in the king's private study, a comfortable room filled with leather-bound books and family photographs. King Alexander was a man in his late 50s with intelligent eyes and graying hair, known throughout the kingdom for his ability to listen carefully and respond thoughtfully to even the most complex problems. He poured 2 glasses of wine and settled into his favorite chair, giving Marcus his complete attention. Marcus began by apologizing for the irregular nature of his request, then carefully explained the conspiracy that threatened the kingdom. He described Victor's organization, their sophisticated intelligence network, and their plan to take control of Valdoria's government and resources. The guard presented the bank statement and communication device as evidence, holding nothing back about the personal pressures he faced. The king listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious with each revelation. When Marcus finished his account, Alexander sat quietly for several minutes, processing the implications of what he had learned. Finally, he asked pointed questions about the conspiracy's timeline, the identity of government officials who might be compromised, and the specific security measures that Victor wanted disabled. King Alexander's response revealed the wisdom that had made him such an effective ruler. Rather than expressing anger or panic, he thanked Marcus for his loyalty and courage in bringing this information forward. The king acknowledged the terrible position that the guard had been placed in, especially regarding his nephew's medical emergency, and promised that the royal family would personally ensure the boy received the best possible care. Together, they developed a counter-strategy that would protect both the kingdom and Marcus's family. The king would allow the state dinner to proceed as planned, but with hidden security measures that would identify and capture Victor's associates when they attempted to install their surveillance equipment. Meanwhile, Marcus would appear to cooperate with the conspiracy, while actually feeding false information to Victor's organization. The plan required Marcus to walk a dangerous tightrope between appearing trustworthy to the conspirators while actually working against them. He would use the secure communication device to send messages that seemed helpful, but actually warned the king's loyal forces about planned activities. The risk was enormous. If Victor discovered the deception, both Marcus and his family would face deadly consequences. King Alexander offered Marcus a way out of the dangerous game they were planning. The royal family could arrange for the guard and his sister's family to disappear quietly, relocating to a safe country with new identities and enough money to live comfortably. It was a generous offer that would solve all of Marcus's immediate problems without requiring him to risk his life fighting the conspiracy. Marcus considered the king's offer seriously, weighing his family's safety against his duty to protect the kingdom. The decision wasn't easy. He had already proven his loyalty by reporting the conspiracy, and no one could fault him for choosing family over country. But as he looked around the study where he had spent so many evenings discussing palace security with the king, Marcus realized that he couldn't abandon the people who had trusted him for 30 years. The loyal guard accepted the dangerous mission, knowing that failure would likely mean death for himself and his family. King Alexander gripped his shoulder firmly, expressing both gratitude and concern for what they were asking him to do. The two men spent the next hour planning every detail of their counter-operation, understanding that they would have only one chance to save the kingdom from foreign control. As Marcus left the king's study that night, he felt both terrified and strangely peaceful. The decision had been made, and he was committed to seeing it through regardless of personal cost. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and greater dangers, but he would face them as he had always faced adversity, with courage, integrity, and unwavering loyalty to the crown he had sworn to defend. The next morning, Marcus sent his first message to Victor, using the secure communication device. He confirmed his willingness to cooperate and requested specific details about the security breach he was supposed to execute during the state dinner. The response came within minutes, containing precise instructions and a reminder about the generous payment waiting for his cooperation. Victor's plan was more sophisticated than Marcus had initially realized. The surveillance equipment wasn't just designed to monitor conversations. It would also create detailed maps of the palace's security systems, communication networks, and emergency protocols. This information would allow the conspirators to take complete control of the kingdom's infrastructure within hours of activating their broader plan. Playing his role as a corrupted guard, Marcus expressed concerns about getting caught and asked for additional guarantees about his family's safety. Victor responded with photos showing his nephew receiving excellent medical care at the European hospital, along with images of Marcus's sister enjoying a luxury hotel suite while waiting for the surgery to be completed. The message was clear. Cooperation would be rewarded, but betrayal would have devastating consequences. King Alexander had assembled a small team of absolutely trustworthy individuals to help execute their counter-operation. The group included the head of palace security, the king's personal secretary who had served the royal family for 40 years, and a technology expert who specialized in detecting and countering surveillance equipment. Each person understood that discovery would mean certain death for everyone involved. The technology expert, a brilliant woman named Sarah, worked with Marcus to understand exactly what Victor's organization planned to install. She created counterfeit versions of the surveillance devices that would appear to function normally, while actually feeding false information back to the conspirators. The deception was technically complex and would require precise timing to implement successfully. During his regular duties, Marcus began subtly documenting the foreign delegates' activities and conversations. He noticed that they spent considerable time studying palace staff schedules, guard rotations, and maintenance protocols. Their questions were becoming increasingly specific about communication systems, backup power sources, and emergency evacuation procedures. On Thursday evening, Victor requested another private meeting to finalize the details of their arrangement. This time, he brought a different associate, a cold-eyed woman who introduced herself as Elena and spoke with a Russian accent. Her presence made Marcus deeply uncomfortable, especially when she demonstrated intimate knowledge of his family's current location and daily activities. Elena showed Marcus satellite photographs of his sister's farm, pointing out how isolated it was from police stations and hospitals. She mentioned specific details about his nephew's medical condition and the experimental treatment he was receiving, emphasizing how easily such delicate procedures could be disrupted by unexpected complications. The threats were subtle but unmistakable. The meeting concluded with Victor handing Marcus a detailed blueprint of the surveillance installation process. The guard was expected to disable specific security sensors at precisely timed intervals, allowing the conspirators' technical team to access restricted areas of the palace. The plan required split-second coordination and left no room for error or hesitation. Marcus spent Thursday night studying the blueprint while Sarah analyzed the technical specifications of the surveillance equipment. Together, they refined their counter-strategy, identifying the exact moments when they could substitute the counterfeit devices without detection. The window of opportunity would last less than 3 minutes during the state dinner's main course. Friday morning brought a message that filled Marcus with both relief and additional pressure. His nephew's surgery had been successful, and the boy was expected to make a full recovery. Victor's organization had indeed provided the finest medical care available, fulfilling their part of the bargain and demonstrating their ability to deliver on promises. Now Marcus was expected to honor his commitment regardless of his true loyalties. The state dinner preparations reached a fever pitch as servants transformed the grand ballroom into an elegant showcase of Valdoria's cultural heritage. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across polished marble floors, while tables groaned under the weight of fine china, silver cutlery, and elaborate floral arrangements. The setting was perfect for what everyone believed would be a celebration of international friendship and cooperation. Victor and his associates spent the afternoon conducting final security sweeps and positioning their technical equipment near the areas Marcus was supposed to access. They moved with the confidence of people who had executed similar operations many times before, treating the evening's activities as routine business rather than a high-stakes conspiracy. As evening approached, Marcus put on his dress uniform and checked his equipment one final time. Hidden in his jacket was Sarah's counterfeit surveillance device, virtually identical to the one Victor wanted him to install, but programmed to serve the king's interests instead. The weight of the device felt heavier than it should have, representing the enormous risks he was taking for loyalty and principle. The foreign dignitaries arrived fashionably late, wearing expensive evening wear and carrying themselves with the arrogance of people accustomed to getting what they wanted. Victor nodded politely to Marcus as he passed through the security checkpoint, their brief eye contact confirming that the plan would proceed as discussed. King Alexander entered the ballroom with his family, appearing relaxed and genuinely pleased to welcome his international guests. Only Marcus and the few people involved in the counter-operation knew that the monarch was actually preparing for the most dangerous evening of his reign. The royal family's apparent trust and happiness made Marcus even more determined to protect them from the conspiracy that threatened everything they had built together. As dinner began, Marcus took his assigned position near the ballroom's main entrance, watching the guests while monitoring the secure communication device hidden in his pocket. Victor's message would come during the main course, giving him the signal to begin the most dangerous mission of his 30-year career. The loyal guard said a silent prayer for courage and wisdom, knowing that the kingdom's future might depend on his actions in the next few hours. The state dinner proceeded with elegant formality as courses of exquisite food were served to the distinguished guests. Marcus watched Victor carefully throughout the evening, noting how the businessman's eyes constantly scanned the room, checking positions and timing with the precision of a military operation. The other foreign delegates played their roles perfectly, engaging in polite conversation about trade agreements while secretly preparing for their country's takeover. At precisely 9:30, during the serving of the main course, Marcus felt his secure communication device vibrate against his chest. Victor's message was simple. Now. The guard acknowledged receipt and began moving toward his assigned position, his heart pounding so hard he was certain other people could hear it. Everything he had worked for during 30 years of loyal service would be decided in the next few minutes. Marcus disabled the first security sensor exactly as instructed, using his master key to access the control panel in a corridor adjacent to the ballroom. To any observer, he appeared to be conducting routine security checks, but he was actually creating a window of opportunity for Victor's technical team to access restricted areas of the palace. The counterfeit surveillance device felt heavier in his pocket with each step. As he moved toward the second checkpoint, Marcus encountered Elena waiting in a shadowed alcove. The cold-eyed woman studied his face carefully, looking for any signs of deception or hesitation. She reminded him that his nephew was still recovering from surgery and would need ongoing medical care that could be provided or withdrawn depending on his continued cooperation. Her presence was clearly intended to ensure he completed his mission without developing last-minute doubts. The second security sensor was located in a more exposed area, requiring Marcus to work quickly while maintaining the appearance of normal duties. He could see Victor's technical specialist moving through the corridor toward the palace's communication center, carrying equipment concealed in a maintenance kit. The timing had to be perfect. Any delay would alert the palace's automated security systems and trigger alarms throughout the building. Marcus successfully disabled the sensor and immediately sent the confirmation message Victor was expecting. Within seconds, he received acknowledgement and instructions to proceed to the final checkpoint near the royal family's private quarters. This location was the most sensitive and dangerous part of the mission. Since discovery, there would certainly result in charges of treason and execution. Moving through the palace's elegant corridors, Marcus passed servants hurrying between the kitchen and ballroom, their arms full of silver platters and crystal wine decanters. None of them suspected that their loyal guard was facilitating what could be the last free evening in their kingdom's history. The weight of his deception pressed down on him like a physical burden, making each step more difficult than the last. The final checkpoint required Marcus to access a control room that monitored the royal family's private living areas. As he opened the door with his security key, he was startled to find Sarah already inside, working frantically with electronic equipment that filled several tables. She looked up with relief when she saw him, indicating that the most critical phase of their counter-operation was about to begin. Sarah had intercepted Victor's technical specialist before he could reach the communication center, using a carefully planned distraction to redirect him to a decoy location where King's loyal agents were waiting. Meanwhile, she had positioned herself to capture the real surveillance equipment when Marcus delivered it, while simultaneously installing her counterfeit devices in the locations Victor's organization expected to control. Marcus handed over the surveillance device Victor had given him, watching as Sarah connected it to a complex array of monitoring equipment. Within minutes, she had downloaded all of the device's programming and identified the network addresses of the computers it was designed to communicate with. This information would allow the King's forces to trace Victor's entire organization and identify all of the compromised government officials who had been secretly cooperating with the Yao conspiracy. The counterfeit device Sarah gave Marcus was identical in appearance to the original but contained sophisticated programming that would feed false information to Victor's controllers while simultaneously tracking their activities. When installed, it would appear to be functioning normally while actually serving as a window into the conspiracy's communications and planning systems. Marcus installed the counterfeit device exactly where Victor had specified, in a location that would monitor the royal family's private conversations and activities. The irony was bitter. He was appearing to betray the people he had sworn to protect while actually helping to defend them from a threat they didn't even know existed. The moral complexity of the situation made him feel physically ill, but he forced himself to complete the task with steady hands. As he left the control room, Marcus sent Victor the final confirmation message indicating that all surveillance equipment had been successfully installed. The response came immediately, expressing satisfaction with his work and providing instructions for the next phase of the conspiracy. Victor's organization now believed they had complete access to the palace's security systems and the royal family's private communications. The return journey to the ballroom felt like walking through a dream. Marcus passed the same servants and guards he had seen before, but everything seemed different now that he had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Regardless of the ultimate outcome, his relationship with the palace staff would never be the same. He had tasted the corruption that came with betraying trust, even when that betrayal was actually service to a higher loyalty. Back in the ballroom, the state dinner was reaching its conclusion with elaborate desserts and ceremonial toasts to international friendship. Victor caught Marcus's eye and nodded approvingly, raising his wine glass in a subtle salute to their successful collaboration. The businessman appeared completely satisfied with the evening's work, having no idea that he had actually helped the king identify and prepare to eliminate his entire network of conspirators. King Alexander delivered a gracious closing speech, thanking his international guests for their visit and expressing hope for continued cooperation between their nations. Only Marcus and the few others involved in the counter-operation understood that the monarch was actually saying farewell to men who would be arrested before sunrise. The king's performance was masterful, showing no hint of the knowledge that would soon destroy his enemies. As the guests began departing, Marcus received one final message from Victor, scheduling a meeting for the following afternoon to discuss payment and future cooperation. The businessman's confidence was absolute. He believed that Valdoria was now completely under his organization's control, and that Marcus had proven himself to be a reliable asset. Tomorrow would bring the shocking realization that loyalty could not be bought at any price. Dawn broke over Valdoria with the sound of military vehicles surrounding the luxury hotel where Victor and his associates were staying. The king's forces moved with precision and overwhelming force. Having spent the entire night analyzing, intelligence gathered through the counterfeit surveillance devices and preparing arrest warrants for dozens of conspirators throughout the kingdom. Marcus stood at his window, watching the operation unfold in the distance, feeling a mixture of relief and exhaustion that made his legs weak. The secure communication device on his table had been buzzing continuously since 4 a.m. with increasingly frantic messages from Victor's organization as their network collapsed under coordinated raids across multiple countries. The conspiracy that had seemed so powerful and inevitable just hours before was crumbling like a house of cards. King Alexander summoned Marcus to his private study at 7 a.m, wanting to personally thank the loyal guard before the full scope of their victory became public knowledge. The monarch looked tired but satisfied as he poured coffee for both of them, acknowledging that the kingdom had been saved by Marcus's courage and integrity when faced with the most tempting offer imaginable. The intelligence gathered during the counter-operation had revealed the conspiracy's true scope. Victor's organization had been planning similar takeovers in 6 other small nations, using a combination of bribery, blackmail, and economic pressure to install puppet governments that would serve corporate interests. Valdoria's successful resistance would inspire other countries to investigate and root out their own networks of compromised officials. Sarah arrived with detailed reports about the surveillance, equipment, and communication networks they had penetrated. Victor's organization had been using cutting-edge technology to coordinate activities across continents, but their confidence in Marcus's cooperation had led them to expose vulnerabilities that skilled analysts could exploit. The counterfeit devices had provided a complete map of their operations, finances, and leadership structure. The most shocking revelation was the identity of government officials who had secretly agreed to cooperate with the foreign takeover. 3 cabinet ministers, 2 military commanders, and the head of the National Bank had all been receiving payments in exchange for their promise to support the transition to corporate control. These trusted leaders would have betrayed their own people for money, making Marcus's loyalty even more remarkable by comparison. Victor's capture had been particularly satisfying for the king's forces. The arrogant businessman who had seemed so confident and powerful was found hiding in a hotel bathroom, desperately trying to destroy documents and communication devices before the authorities arrived. His transformation from smooth-talking manipulator to terrified criminal was complete, showing how quickly circumstances could change when loyalty proved stronger than greed. Elena and the technical specialists had tried to escape through a network of safe houses and private aircraft, but the intelligence Marcus had helped gather allowed security forces to anticipate their movements. The cold-eyed woman who had threatened his family was arrested at a small airfield while attempting to board a plane to a country with no extradition treaty. Her capture eliminated the primary threat to Marcus's sister and nephew. The personal cost of Marcus's decision became clear as the day progressed. Victor's organization had indeed provided excellent medical care for his nephew, but that support would obviously end with their arrest and prosecution. The $5 million in his bank account would be frozen as evidence, and the promises of future wealth would never be fulfilled. Marcus had chosen honor over riches, but his family would continue to struggle financially. King Alexander addressed this concern in the most generous way possible. The royal family established a trust fund that would provide for Marcus's nephew's ongoing medical care and education, while also ensuring his sister's farm would prosper through favorable loans and agricultural support. The king couldn't match Victor's monetary offer, but he could guarantee that loyalty would be rewarded with security and opportunity. More importantly, the king offered Marcus a choice about his future role in the kingdom. He could continue serving as a palace guard, with the respect and gratitude of everyone who learned about his crucial role in saving Valdoria. Alternatively, he could accept promotion to head of royal security, with responsibility for modernizing the kingdom's defenses against future threats. The decision would be entirely his, based on what would make him happiest after his years of faithful service. Marcus chose to remain a simple palace guard, feeling that the modest position suited his temperament and values better than a prestigious administrative role. He had never sought recognition or advancement, finding satisfaction in the daily routine of protecting people he cared about. The king respected this decision while privately arranging for Marcus to receive the kingdom's highest civilian honor in a ceremony, attended by representatives from allied nations. The international response to Valdoria's successful resistance inspired similar investigations in other countries, leading to the exposure and prosecution of corrupt networks across multiple continents. Marcus's refusal to be bought had triggered a chain reaction that strengthened democratic institutions and corporate accountability worldwide. His personal decision had consequences far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Years later, Marcus continued his morning rounds through the palace corridors with the same dedication he had always shown. His hair was completely gray now, and his steps were slower, but his eyes still held the alertness of someone who took his responsibilities seriously. New guards often asked him about the night he saved the kingdom, but he preferred to focus on daily duties rather than past glory. The secure communication device sat in a place of honor on his bookshelf, no longer functional, but serving as a reminder of the choice between loyalty and betrayal that every person faces at some point in their lives. Marcus had been tested by the ultimate temptation and had proven that some things truly cannot be bought at any price. His legacy would inspire future generations to understand that honor and integrity are worth more than all the riches in the world. On quiet evenings, Marcus sometimes received letters from his nephew, now studying medicine at a prestigious university with dreams of becoming a doctor who helps children like himself. The young man never knew how close he had come to being used as leverage in an international conspiracy, but he understood that his uncle's choices had somehow made his education and recovery possible. The guard's sacrifice had been rewarded with the knowledge that his family's future was secure through honorable means rather than blood money.